Unyielding Spirit, the George Washington Chronicles. Chapter 1. Virginia Roots. Nestled along the winding banks of the Potomac River lay the vast lands of the Washington family. As the sun set, casting a deep, purplish hue over the horizon, a young George Washington stood, contemplatively surveying the vast acres that bore witness to his family's legacy. The serene ripples of the river reflected not just the shimmering stars, but also the profound weight of ancestry, privilege, and expectation that George bore on his young shoulders. Virginia, in the mid-1700s, was a landscape of contrasts. Its fertile lands promised boundless opportunities, while its societal structures were strictly regimented, largely determined by birthright and fortune. The Washingtons, belonging to the landowning class, were undoubtedly among Virginia's elite. Yet, it was not merely their wealth that distinguished them, but a deep-seated belief in values like humility, honor, and public service. This ethos, ingrained in George from his earliest days, would come to define his life and the very foundation of a nascent nation. Being born into affluence could easily be a curse masked as a blessing. It bore the risk of breeding complacency, entitlement, and a disconnection from the struggles of the average colonial citizen. However, George's upbringing was far from typical. The untimely death of his father, Augustine Washington, when George was only 11, plunged the family into a period of uncertainty. The vast lands and the accompanying status were there, but the young boy had to navigate the complexities of inheritance, familial obligations, and the looming responsibilities of estate management. Yet adversity, as often is the case, was a strict teacher. Without the protective shield of paternal guidance, George quickly acquainted himself with the realities of plantation management, cultivating both crops and character. His mother, Mary Ball Washington, played an instrumental role in this phase of his life. A formidable woman of her times, she emphasized the virtues of humility and honor, ensuring that George never mistook privilege for license. The Potomac, with its vastness and unpredictable currents, was emblematic of George's early life. He learned to navigate its waters, both as a surveyor and as a young man learning the art of life. His expeditions into the wilderness, mapping lands, and interacting with Native American tribes were not just professional engagements, but profound lessons in diplomacy, understanding, and survival. While George's understanding of land and boundaries grew, so did his realization of the invisible lines that marked colonial society. The British Crown's tightening grip, both in terms of taxation and civil liberties, became palpably restrictive. However, it wasn't the economics of the Stamp Act or the tea tax that riled young George, as much as the inherent dishonor in being treated as a second-class citizen in one's land. His vast lands weren't just estates. They were a testament to the rights of individuals, rights that were being trampled upon. In Virginia, land wasn't just property, it was identity. It was a constant reminder of where one came from and, more importantly, where one could go. For George, the vast stretches of the Potomac weren't just ancestral holdings, but a canvas of potential, the seeds of revolution, which would later be sown in the streets of Boston. And the battlefields of Saratoga found their earliest nurture in the soil of Virginia and in the hearts of its sons and daughters. In essence, understanding George Washington requires understanding Virginia of the 1700s. It was a land of boundless promise and deep-rooted values. The very soil seemed to breed a spirit of defiance, resilience, and honor. The unyielding spirit of George Washington, which would one day challenge an empire and birth a nation, was forged in the crucible of Virginia's lands, waters, and ethos. As night deepened over the Potomac, and young George retreated from its banks, he carried with him not just the legacy of the Washingtons, but the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of Virginia, a state that believed in the values of humility, honor, and public service would, through its son, gift these ideals to an entire nation. The journey of George Washington, from a contemplative boy by the Potomac to the first President of the United States, is a testament to the unyielding spirit of Virginia and its unwavering values. Chapter 2: Called to the Army. The air was thick with tension as whispers of impending conflict echoed through the colonies. The British and the French were jostling for control of the rich Ohio Valley territory. Amidst this rising cacophony, a young, ambitious George Washington found himself thrust into a role of great significance. Though only in his early 20s, he was entrusted with commanding militia in what would be remembered as the French and Indian War. This chapter of his life would come to define not only his military acumen, but also his indomitable spirit. Being born into a privileged Virginia family, Washington's transition to military life wasn't born out of necessity, but rather a genuine sense of duty. His initial steps in the military world were as the official surveyor of Culpeper County, Virginia. This experience acquainted him with the wilderness of the American frontier, forging a resilience in him that would be indispensable on the battlefield. In 1753, George was appointed as a major in the Virginia militia. His first significant mission was to deliver a message to the French, warning them against encroaching on British territory. The task was daunting. It required him to traverse rough terrains and negotiate with the French in the harsh winter wilderness. Yet, Washington accomplished it with a determination that was becoming emblematic of his character. His detailed notes from this expedition became a pivotal document, titled The Journal of Major George Washington. This was the public's first glimpse into the analytical and reflective nature of this future leader. However, it was the infamous incident at Fort Necessity that would be Washington's crucible moment. In 1754, while leading a surprise attack against the French, Washington's forces clashed with a diplomatic party, leading to the death of a French diplomat. This altercation set off a string of events, culminating in Washington's forces taking a defensive stance at Fort Necessity. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Washington had to endure a humbling surrender to the French. For many, such a setback might have signified the end of a promising military career. Yet, for Washington, it was a lesson. He analyzed his strategic errors, internalized them, and ensured that they informed his future decision. This ability to learn from mistakes was a hallmark of his leadership style. More challenges awaited him as the war progressed. The British Army, with its traditional European style of linear warfare, often found itself at odds with the guerrilla tactics employed by the French. and their Native American allies. Washington, with his experience in frontier warfare, was quick to recognize the need for adaptation. He began advocating for a more flexible and dynamic approach to battle, incorporating elements of Native American fighting styles. Though met with resistance initially, his superiors couldn't ignore his insights for long, especially as British losses mounted. In the subsequent years, Washington served as an aide to General Edward Braddock and witnessed firsthand the pitfalls of rigid military tactics. Braddock's forces were decimated in an ambush, a catastrophe Washington had anticipated but could not prevent due to his junior rank. Yet, in the thick of battle, amidst the chaos, Washington's leadership shone brightly. Riding back and forth across the battlefield, he rallied the British forces, ensuring an orderly retreat and saving countless lives. The admiration and respect he earned that day from both his peers and superiors were palpable. While the British Empire might have viewed the colonies as subordinate territories, they could not ignore the native talent that emerged from their ranks, especially in the form of George Washington. As the French and Indian War raged on, Washington continued to evolve as a military strategist and leader. His experiences, both the triumphs and defeats, became the bedrock of his military philosophy. The lessons from Fort Necessity, the ambush at Monongahela, and countless skirmishes and negotiations with Native American tribes all contributed to molding a leader who was as empathetic as he was strategic. When the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763, marking the end of the French and Indian War, George Washington emerged from it not as the inexperienced young militia officer he was at the start, but as a seasoned warrior, well versed in the complexities of frontier warfare and diplomacy. But perhaps more importantly, the war instilled in him an unyielding spirit, a quality that would be his guiding force in the Revolutionary storm that was soon to engulf the colonies. In the annals of history, wars are often remembered for their victors and the territories gained or lost. However, in the larger tapestry of life, wars also play a pivotal role in shaping individuals. For George Washington, the French and Indian War was more than just a geopolitical struggle. It was a forge, tempering and hardening his spirit, preparing him for the monumental challenges he would face in the quest for American independence. Chapter 3: Visions of Revolution. The dawn of the American Revolution was heralded not by the roar of cannons, but by the simmering resentment of its people. While the colonies experienced rapid economic growth and cultural development, they also bore the brunt of distant British governance. This disconnect between the colonists and the crown was not just geographical, but also ideological. Among those who felt this growing tension keenly was George Washington. By the time the first cries of revolt echoed from the streets of Boston, Washington had already been molded by his military experience and had formed staunch views on colonial rights and British overreach. The Stamp Act of 1765 was a particularly blatant example of Britain's detached governance, imposing a direct tax on printed materials, from legal documents to newspapers. It was seen by many as an infringement on colonial autonomy. While the fiscal implications were significant, the ideological assault was even greater. The act signaled a clear message from the crown: the colonies were subordinates, subject to the whims of distant rulers. For Washington, who had fought and bled for British interests during the French and Indian War, this was not only an affront to colonial rights, but also a dishonor to the sacrifices made by many of his compatriots. Washington's sentiments were echoed throughout the colonies, leading to widespread protests. His extensive correspondence from this period showcases his growing disillusionment with British policies. While he initially advocated for a peaceful resolution and reconciliation with Britain, the escalating tensions, especially events like the Boston Tea Party in 1773, painted a grim picture. The audacious act of dumping an entire shipment of British tea into Boston Harbor was a clear message of defiance. While Washington criticized the destruction of property, he also understood the deep-seated frustrations that led to such drastic actions. As whispers of rebellion turned into open discussions of revolution, representatives from the colonies gathered for the First Continental Congress in 1774. Washington was among those selected to represent Virginia. The Congress was a cauldron of revolutionary ideas, with leaders debating the path forward. Washington, with his military background and leadership during the French and Indian War, emerged as a prominent voice, advocating for the establishment of a continental army. While many still hoped for a peaceful resolution, Washington, ever the pragmatist, recognized the potential need for a show of force. The Convention of Intolerance, a term used by critics to describe the various punitive measures imposed by the British in response to the Boston Tea Party, further exacerbated tension. Popularly referred to as the Intolerable Acts, they sought to punish Massachusetts for its defiance and serve as a warning to other colonies. Instead, they had the opposite effect, galvanizing colonial unity against a common oppressor. The stage was set for a revolution, and Washington, recognizing the gravity of the situation, did not shy away from the looming conflict. When the Second Continental Congress convened in 1775, the skirmishes at Lexington and Concord had already ignited the flames of war. Washington's appointment as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army was a testament to his leadership, military experience, and the trust he had garnered among his peers. Taking command of a ragtag army, Washington faced monumental challenges. He had to transform a group of disparate militias into a cohesive fighting force, instill discipline, and ensure adequate supplies all while facing the might of the British Empire. Yet, what the Continental Army lacked in experience and resources, they made up for in spirit and determination. Washington's leadership was instrumental in navigating these early challenges. His experience at Fort Necessity had taught him the significance of adaptability, and he quickly embraced unconventional tactics to counter the British. The unyielding spirit that had seen him through the trials of the French and Indian War was now guiding an entire army. An army fighting not for territory or riches, but for an idea of freedom. The journey from the verdant fields of Virginia to the command tents of the Continental Army was not just a personal one for Washington, but symbolic of the American spirit. From the simmering resentments of the Stamp Act to the open defiance of the Boston Tea Party, and the unity forged in the crucible of the Continental Congress, the American Revolution was as much an ideological battle as it was a military one. Washington, with his unyielding spirit, stood as a beacon for all those who believed in the revolutionary ideals of liberty, justice, and self-determination. Chapter 4: Valley Forge and Victory. The winter of 177,778 was not just a season, but a crucible. As the snow blanketed the landscape around Valley Forge, it covered not just the earth, but also the dreams and aspirations of the fledgling United States. In these trying times, the weight of a revolution, the hope of a nation, and the destiny of a people rested on the shoulders of George Washington and his Continental Army. Valley Forge was not chosen for its comfort or strategic value, but out of sheer necessity. The British had successfully captured the American capital, Philadelphia, forcing Washington's army to find winter quarters. The camp, located about 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia, was in proximity to the British forces, allowing Washington to both protect the surrounding countryside and monitor British movements. However, the initial reasons for selecting Valley Forge paled in comparison to the trials that ensued. The conditions were brutal. Freezing temperatures, lack of adequate clothing, and severe food shortages plagued the army. To make matters worse, disease was rampant, claiming more lives than battle ever did. The image of soldiers, wrapped in tattered blankets, leaving bloody footprints in the snow as they stood guard, became emblematic of the sacrifices made during that grim winter. And yet, this bleak backdrop set the stage for one of the most transformative periods in American history. Valley Forge was more than just a military encampment. It was the fulcrum upon which the fate of the American Revolution teetered. Washington, ever the beacon of strength, refused to let despair seep into the ranks. His leadership was characterized by his deep empathy for his men. Instead of seeking shelter in a warm house, he chose to endure the same hardships as his soldiers, staying in a simple log cabin. His presence among the troops, his unwavering resolve, and his genuine concern for their well-being provided a semblance of hope in the darkest of times. However, it was not just Washington's leadership that would see the army through. Valley Forge became the site of a significant military transformation. With the arrival of Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a Prussian military officer, the ragtag group of colonial soldiers underwent rigorous training. Evolving into a formidable fighting force, Steuben's drills, discipline, and tactical knowledge, coupled with Washington's leadership, reshaped the Continental Army. Simultaneously, outside the boundaries of the encampment, diplomatic efforts were bearing fruit. The Treaty of Alliance with France, signed in February 1778, was a testament to the tireless diplomatic efforts of individuals like Benjamin Franklin. This alliance was pivotal, ensuring that the Continental Army would receive much-needed supplies, funds, and, importantly, military support from one of Europe's great powers. As winter faded and spring dawned in 1778, the army that emerged from Valley Forge was starkly different from the one that had entered it. They were now a united, disciplined, and determined force. The British, recognizing this transformation, evacuated Philadelphia in June, marking a turning point in the war. The subsequent years would see several skirmishes, battles, and strategies play out. The American and French alliance would prove instrumental in cornering the British, culminating in the Siege of Yorktown in 1781. the combined might of the Continental and French armies, along with the French Navy, laid siege to the British forces under General Cornwallis. This siege, lasting nearly 3 weeks, ended with Cornwallis's surrender, effectively sealing the fate of the American Revolution. However, it's essential to recognize that while battles like Yorktown were pivotal, the spirit of the Revolution was forged in places like Valley Forge. It was in the biting cold, amidst hunger and disease, that the true character of the Revolution was revealed. It was here that the ideals of liberty, fraternity, and the unyielding spirit of a nation were truly tested. In the annals of history, Valley Forge stands not as a testament to suffering, but as a beacon of resilience. It symbolizes the unwavering spirit of the American people and their determination to fight against all odds. And at the heart of this epic tale stands George Washington, whose leadership, empathy, and indomitable spirit guided a fledgling nation towards its destiny. The victory over the mighty British Empire was not just a military triumph, but a victory of ideals, of hope over despair, and resilience over adversity. It was a testament to the unyielding spirit of a people and their leader, a spirit that was forged in the fires of Valley Forge and carried them to victory. Chapter 5: An Unwilling President. With the cries of freedom and the smell of gunpowder fading into memory, the newly liberated United States of America faced a different challenge: self-governance. The Articles of Confederation, the initial framework of the American government, revealed structural weaknesses. The country needed a strong foundation, and once again, its gaze turned to George Washington. The Constitutional Convention of 1787, held in Philadelphia, brought together some of the brightest minds of the era, each with their vision of the emerging nation. While Washington had hoped to retire quietly to his beloved Mount Vernon, the urgency of the situation beckoned him. His reputation and unyielding spirit were needed to lend credibility to the proceedings. Reluctantly, but dutifully, Washington presided over the convention, ensuring that divergent views found common ground. The result of these intense debates and deliberations was the United States Constitution, a document that struck a balance between a strong central government and states' rights. While many celebrated its creation, Washington knew that the Constitution's success depended on its practical implementation. As the country looked to elect its first president, there was an overwhelming consensus about the best candidate: George Washington. It was not a position he desired. He had already given much to the cause of freedom and longed for a private life, but the call of duty and the understanding of the fragility of the nascent nation pulled him once more into public service. Washington's election as the first president of the United States was unanimous, an honor that spoke volumes about his stature and the nation's trust in him. But with this great honor came the immense responsibility of shaping the executive branch and setting precedents that would guide the republic for centuries. One of the most significant steps Washington took was the establishment of the cabinet system. Recognizing that the breadth of presidential responsibilities was too vast for one person, he sought the counsel of experts in various fields. The inception of the state, treasury, and war departments were not just administrative moves, but a recognition of the complex challenges the nation faced. Throughout his presidency, Washington was acutely aware that his every action, decision, or inaction would set a precedent. He was particularly keen on ensuring that the presidency did not evolve into a monarchy. His leadership style was a blend of authority and restraint. He was not a ruler, but a servant leader, taking decisions in the best interests of the nation. Perhaps one of the most enduring legacies of Washington's presidency was his stance on term limits. While the Constitution did not restrict the number of terms a president could serve, Washington, ever wary of the dangers of prolonged power, chose to step down after 2 terms. His farewell address, a document rich in wisdom and foresight, not only announced his retirement, but also provided guidance to the nation. He warned against the dangers of partisan politics and entangling foreign alliances. This act of stepping down was revolutionary. In an era where power was often clung to until death, Washington's voluntary relinquishment of the presidency showcased his unwavering commitment to the principles of the Republic. It established the tradition of a peaceful transfer of power, an essential hallmark of American democracy. His post-presidential years were short-lived, yet he watched with keen interest as the country navigated its early challenges. He remained a symbol of unity and stability until his death in 1799. In examining the life and legacy of George Washington, it becomes evident that his true greatness lay not just in leading a revolution or in crafting a nation, but in his understanding of power and his dedication to principles. From his reluctant acceptance of the presidency to his decision to step down, Washington epitomized the ethos of the American Revolution. That power is a responsibility, not a privilege. In today's complex political landscape, Washington's legacy serves as a poignant reminder of the ideals upon which the United States was founded. His leadership, marked by its restraint, wisdom, and unyielding spirit, continues to be a beacon for leaders worldwide. The Unwilling President thus set a path, proving that true leadership is not about wielding power, but about empowering others. Chapter 6: Sunset at Mount Vernon. The Potomac River flowed serenely past Mount Vernon, its waters whispering tales of time and tide. Nestled atop a verdant hill, the majestic mansion with its wide piazza and distinctive cupola stood as a testament to George Washington's meticulous design and vision. Here, far from the hustle of political life, the first president of the United States found solace. This was his refuge, the place where he sought to understand the past and envision the future. Mount Vernon was not just a home, it was an embodiment of Washington's character. The expansive farmland, the well-organized gardens, and the slaves who toiled there reflected the contradictions of the era and the man. Washington was a planter and a slave owner, yet he grappled with the institution of slavery, eventually making provisions in his will to free his slaves upon the death of his wife, Martha. As twilight approached, the man who had braved battles, confronted political chaos, and helped craft a nation would often sit on the piazza, looking out over the river. In those moments of reflection, Washington might have pondered on the weight of the choices he had made, the sacrifices borne not just by him, but by countless others, and the indelible mark they left on the fabric of a fledgling nation. The American Revolution was not merely a quest for independence from British rule, but a quest for a nation's soul. As the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, Washington's steadfastness had guided the American forces through the darkest of times. Yet, his most significant battles were not always fought on open fields, but in dimly lit rooms filled with parchment, quill, and fervent debate. His tenure as president was marked by an acute awareness of the precedents he would set. Each decision, each action, and each word would shape the role of the presidency and the future of the United States. In that office, he demonstrated a balance of power and restraint, strength, and humility. Now, at Mount Vernon, there were no battles to be fought, no offices to hold, and no more precedents to set. There was only time to reflect, time to cherish moments with Martha, and time to walk the grounds of his plantation. He took a keen interest in farming innovations, hoping to turn Mount Vernon into a model of agricultural efficiency. This was a return to his roots, to a life before the whirlwind of revolutions and statecraft. Yet, even in these moments of seeming tranquility, Washington's commitment to his nation remained unwavering. He closely followed the nation's progress, ever mindful of the ideals of liberty, justice, and democracy. His letters from this period, penned to friends and fellow patriots, showcased his hopes and concerns for the future of the United States. In December 1799, fate cast its final shadow on the illustrious life of George Washington. After a brief illness, the man who had borne the hopes and dreams of a nation breathed his last. America was plunged into mourning, for it had lost not just a leader, but a symbol of its very identity. Yet, as with all great souls, Washington's legacy was destined to endure far beyond his mortal years. The principles he championed, the precedents he set, and the vision he held for America continue to shape the nation's journey. At Mount Vernon, where the Potomac River whispers tales of time, the spirit of George Washington remains alive. It is in the rustling leaves, the golden sunsets, and the enduring edifice of his beloved home. In the annals of history, many figures rise and fade, their deeds becoming mere footnotes. But Washington's legacy, forged in the crucible of revolution and solidified in the corridors of governance, remains unyielding. It serves as a beacon for all who believe in the power of ideals, the strength of character, and the undying spirit of a nation. As the sun sets on Mount Vernon, it is not just the end of a day, but a reminder of a life lived with purpose, passion, and an unyielding spirit. Epilogue: the spirit lives on. When historians and patriots look to the roots of the United States of America, they invariably cast their eyes to the silhouette of George Washington. His life, immortalized not only in textbooks, but also in the very soul of the nation, remains a beacon of leadership, duty, and sacrifice. Washington's story, intertwined with the narrative of America, is a testament to an unyielding spirit that shaped a republic. In contemporary America, as one navigates through its sprawling cities and quaint towns, George Washington's presence is ubiquitous. His visage graces the $1 bill, an everyday emblem of American commerce and enterprise. The colossal Washington Monument pierces the skyline of the nation's capital, serving as a concrete reminder of his towering contribution. His namesake, Washington, D.C., stands as the hub of governance and diplomacy. These are but material manifestations. Washington's true legacy is etched deeper. To understand Washington's enduring relevance, one must venture beyond the realm of symbols and into the essence of what America represents. Every nation is shaped by its heroes, and heroes are born of their times, molded by the challenges they face and the values they uphold. Washington's era was fraught with uncertainties. The dream of a free nation was nascent, fragile, and audacious. At every juncture, be it on the battlefields, in the chambers of governance, or during personal trials, Washington showcased an unwavering resolve. It is said that adversity reveals character. The American Revolution was not just a struggle for independence, but a crucible that forged characters of iron. Washington's leadership during these times was less about grandeur and more about grit. At Valley Forge, when the Continental Army grappled with biting cold and dwindling hope, Washington's determination held them together. He was not just leading troops, he was nurturing the spirit of a nascent nation. His presidency, though marked by accolades, was no less challenging. The young republic was like an infant, taking its first steps, prone to stumbles and falls. Washington had the daunting task of ensuring that those steps were firm and resolute. His leadership style was a balance of authority and humility. By consciously stepping down after 2 terms, he set a democratic precedent, emphasizing governance over dominance. But Washington's influence is not merely historical, it is deeply philosophical. He represents an ideal, the belief that determination, integrity, and patriotism can shape destiny. His life is a lesson in perseverance. Every setback he faced, every challenge he overcame, adds a chapter to the chronicle of an unyielding spirit. In today's America, as the nation grapples with new challenges, from social divides to global leadership, the principles Washington upheld offer guidance. His emphasis on unity, his caution against divisive partisanship, and his unwavering commitment to the nation serve as a compass. As generations come and go, facing trials unique to their times, they would do well to remember Washington's wisdom. However, celebrating Washington does not mean glossing over the complexities and contradictions of his life. As a slave owner, he was a man of his time, complicit in a system that denied liberty to many. Yet, in his later years, his views evolved, culminating in the decision to free his slaves upon his wife's death. This transformation is a part of his narrative, reminding us that heroes are human, capable of growth and change. Today, as schoolchildren across America learn about George Washington, it is not just dates and events they imbibe, but values. He becomes more than a historical figure. He transforms into a symbol of what it means to be American. His chronicle, laden with tales of bravery, sacrifice, and wisdom, instills pride and offers inspiration. As the sun sets over the Potomac River and the silhouettes of monuments rise against the twilight, one feels the spirit of George Washington. His story, echoing through the annals of time, serves as a poignant reminder that while empires might wane and civilizations might crumble, the spirit of true heroes remains unyielding. And in that spirit lies the essence of America, a nation born of dreams, determination, and the indomitable will of its founding fathers.